Hey everybody, and welcome to this lesson in your A+ 1202 course preparation, where I'm going to prepare you for everything you need to know for your A+ 1202. Today we're looking at exam objective 2.10. We've made it so far. We're going to look at all of these things you need to know about your router settings, your wireless specific settings, and your firewall settings. And then I'm going to give you some practice questions at the end. All right, let's go ahead and get straight into it with our router security settings. So the first thing we need to know about is if you've got a router at your office that you're trying to configure in order to up the security, the first thing we need to do is make sure we are changing the default passwords. Generally, every router is going to come with a certain default password, and many attackers know the default passwords based on the model of router. So the first thing you should be doing is changing that default password so no one can use this very simple basic attack. Log in, change the default password. Don't keep the same password, otherwise really anyone who wants to can access it. The next thing is IP filtering. So within your router's settings, you can actually go into a feature and ensure that you can block or allow specific IP addresses. So if you are sitting in your home and you log into your router and you notice that, hey, Mark, my neighbor, has actually connected to my my router. So I need to go ahead and block Mark's IP address so that he can't do that anymore. All right. So that is something that you could potentially do in your router settings. You can block or allow specific IP addresses. Why is this good? You're enhancing security by preventing any unwanted network traffic. So blocking known IP addresses or restricting access to internal services from specific external IPs. Just know that you can use an access control list to inspect and block your IP addresses as to who can and cannot access your network. All right. You can set to either permit that IP address or deny that IP address in your router's settings. The next thing we need to know is firmware updates. You want to make sure you are always having up-to-date firmware for your router, because that's going to mean that your router has the most up-to-date update. The more updated it is, the more secure it is, and additionally, the more security vulnerabilities are going to be patched. All right, you're going to want to make sure your router is always updated. We should hopefully know that by now, because if you have outdated hardware of any kind, it's going to be vulnerable to known attacks. The next thing we need to know about is content filtering. This allows an administrator to block access to a specific website, an online service, or a category of content at the network level. So you can go into your router's settings and you can actually say, hey, you know what? I don't want you to be able to access this particular website. I am going to block this. So long as you are connected to this router, you are not going to be able to access this website because it is blocked. I have filtered that content. All right, this URL is not accessible. We also need to know about secure physical placement. If you make sure you place your router in a secure physical location, no one is going to be able to physically access it. All right. They could potentially access it by plugging directly into it and reset it to its factory default setting. They could install malicious firmware or steal information, bypassing those digital security features. So make sure basically that your router is in a secure place where only you can access it, potentially locked in a safe of some sort, or a cupboard, or in a steel grate with a padlock on it. It's just an example. You really just need to know, make sure it is physically secured and locked away. All right. The next thing we need to know specifically is a setting called Universal Plug and Play, or UPnP. This is essentially a protocol that allows devices to automatically discover each other and open ports on your router, which enables seamless communication across your network. So it's really convenient because it simplifies connectivity. Universal Plug and Play offers convenience by streamlining device setup, allowing devices such as gaming consoles or security cameras to automatically open the necessary ports on your router, bypassing manual configuration. So they can kind of automatically configure themselves, which is really convenient if you want things to happen quickly and smoothly. But as we can imagine, it is a potential security risk, because automatic port opening without explicit user authorization can create vulnerabilities. Pretty much, you could have malicious software that could exploit your universal plug and play to expose your internal network to external threats. So really, for your exam, what you need to know is, because of the high level of security vulnerability, you want to make sure that you completely disable universal plug and play, because otherwise, there's just too many security vulnerabilities based on what I just discussed there. So universal plug and play, yes, it has convenience, but you should probably disable it to prevent anyone automatically gaining access who otherwise wouldn't and shouldn't be able to. Hey guys, this video is sponsored by the A+ Core 1 and Core 2 Ultimate Learning Guide. This learning guide has helped many people pass their Core 1 and Core 2 exams, meaning that they can move on to their Network Plus and Security Plus sooner rather than later. In the learning guide, here's what you will get: detailed notes, revision notes, active recall questions, and multiple choice questions for every single exam objective. 3 full-length practice exams with performance-based questions, a document with performance-based questions, a video showing you exactly how to study using multiple choice questions so you will be moving ahead of 99% of other people at a much faster rate because you are studying more effectively. A video giving you test taking tips in case you get stuck on a question in the exam. A video showing you how to use free AI tools to 10 times your study sessions. And best of all, I want this to be accessible to everyone regardless of your economic position, so I've made it extremely affordable. So if this sounds good to you, you can head over to journeytocyber.com and grab your A+ Core 1 or Core 2 learning guide today. You also need to know about some advanced router security methods. The first thing is a screened subset, otherwise known as a demilitarized zone. What is this? Let's actually do a little drawing really quickly. I think sometimes this is the best way to talk about some otherwise complex topics. So you've got your primary network over here, all right? This is your primary network. This is where all your people are working, and you've got the internet full of all these other people, and they need to access something on your site. Let's say you have a server, right? If you have a server inside your site and everyone's coming in and accessing that server for whatever it is they need to access, once they get access, they could potentially pivot now and go in your network and cause a whole lot of damage. We don't want that to happen. So what we want to do is we want to set up something called a screened subnet or a demilitarized zone, which is kind of where we, instead of having a network here and having that publicly accessible server or whatever it may be on the inside of our primary network, what we do is we actually create a subsect within our primary network where we have the network that everyone in our organization uses and that contains all of our primary internal resources. And then we create a little zone over here, which is separate, which contains any public facing things that people may need to access over the internet, our servers, whatever it may be. This is called our demilitarized zone or our screened subnet. It is separate from our main network. So now if someone gains access to this, they cannot just pivot into our main network. They are going to have to go through an authentication process of some sort, which is going to have very strict security measures, and they're not going to make it through. All right. So it is a method of making sure that we are separating our primary network from public facing things that the public may need to access. That's as simple as I can put it. So when we're talking about a screen subnet or demilitarized zone, we're hosting public facing services, web servers, email servers, etc. But we're also wanting to make sure that the attacker is not able to compromise that server and then get into our main network, because if we use a screen subnet or a demilitarized zone, we're isolating that from our main network. So they're not going to be able to just get straight into it. It's going to create a buffer. We also need to talk about secure management access, which is basically just the purpose of implementing basic security measures that we've talked about previously on the router. So we want to make sure that the router's web-based or command line interfaces are used for administrative tasks. Those things are secure. So how do we do this? We're looking at changing the default password. We're looking at restricting management access to a specific network segment. So for example, only the internal network. We're looking at disabling remote access from the internet so people can't log in over a network. We're looking at using encrypted protocols like HTTPS instead of unencrypted, such as HTTP. So a lot of the security processes we've already talked about, we're just making sure we're applying all of them to our router, all right? Long story short, that's what we need to know. Okay, now wireless network security, some basic things we need to be aware of that we've also kind of covered before, nothing really new here. Change the SSID. So we've talked about changing the default password. We've said that some routers may come with a standard password, but the way that attackers know, hey, this is the password that applies to this particular router is because generally the router will have a specific name. You know, it might be called Telstra 123FC, just for example. An attacker can see that name and they'll know, okay, this is a Telstra router. Generally, this model of Telstra router has this default password. Let's try this. So if we change the SSID, which is just the Wi-Fi name that your router is putting out there, you can eliminate that issue. Change it from Telstra 123FC or whatever to, you can't hack me, or whatever it is you want to use. That way they can't immediately know what the default password should be. All right. You can also disable the SSID broadcast, which is where you basically say that your router does not broadcast your SSID. If you look in your Wi-Fi options for networks, it's not going to show up. In order to connect, this person will have to already know what the SSID is, and they will have to manually enter it. Okay, it's not a completely strong security measure because the SSID can still be discovered by a determined attacker using tools that are quite available, but it can prevent someone who is just looking for something to connect to, and it can prevent them easily connecting. Strong encryption, of course, we want to make sure we're using the strongest encryption possible, which, as we talked about in a previous exam objective, is WPA3. That is the strongest Wi-Fi protocol, which uses the strongest encryption. WPA3 with AES is the strongest combination that we can use. We talked about that before, not going to go into it too much here. And configuring guest access. If you want, you can set up a separate isolated network for guests, which would prevent their devices from accessing your main network's resources. Your shared files, your shared printers, etc. You can keep them separate. Only do this if you need guest access. If you don't, you don't need to do this, right? Only do this if you need people to be accessing your computer, your device, and you want to significantly limit the control that they have, right? You can set up a guest network there. All right. Firewall settings. What do we need to know? We basically need to know that the simple things that we want to do is disable unused ports. If we have ports we're not using, we want to make sure we disable them in our firewall settings, because that would mean that no one can access them. If we do not disable those ports, people are able to connect to those ports, and that could potentially provide a method of entry into our network, which of course we do not want. So you want to explicitly block ports that you are not using. We also need to know about port forwarding / mapping. What is this? It's a feature that directs incoming internet traffic on a specific port to a designated service on your internal network, which enables remote access to services like gaming servers or security cameras. So real quick, what that might look like is, if I delete all of this, what that might look like is you've got a network in here, and you've got a whole bunch of things that people are like accessing, right? So you've also got your router over here. Now your router is going to say, let's say you've got Bob over here, and he wants to access this one here. Bob is going to say, hey, I want to come in and access this particular device, but Bob only knows your IP address, which let's say is like 111.11.1.1, just because it's easy for me to draw that. Bob is going to say, hey, I want to access 111.11.1.1. But that's the IP address of your router. So he's going to say, I want to access it on port 1092. And that port has been designated to this particular resource. So that's basically what port forwarding is referring to. And what we need to know is, for anything that people don't need to access, we're going to want to make sure they cannot use port forwarding to try to gain access into those unused portions of the network. All right, so that's why it's saying that for certain applications it's necessary, but wherever you don't need it, make sure it's turned off and they cannot use it. So make sure your port forwarding and mapping is configured correctly. Alrighty, let's get into some practice questions now for this exam objective. Let's see how we're going. The first question reads, a home user is setting up a new Wi-Fi router. The user wants to ensure the router is protected against known security vulnerabilities that could allow hackers to gain access to their network. What specific action should the user take? A, change the default Wi-Fi network name. B, install the latest firmware updates for the router. C, disable the guest Wi-Fi network. Or D, implement a strong password for the Wi-Fi network. These are all good things to do, but read the question carefully. There's a specific one that's right. Your answer's coming after I sip my coffee. 3, 2, pause the video if you have to. 1, here we go. It is going to be B, install the latest firmware updates for the router. If you want to protect against known security vulnerabilities, the update to the router is going to be what is going to make sure we are fixing any new known issues. All of these other things are good to do, but if we read the question correctly, it said, how can we protect against known security vulnerabilities? We're looking at specific vulnerabilities here. Changing the default Wi-Fi network name is a good general step. Disabling the guest Wi-Fi network is, actually having a guest network is good security practice. It's something we want. We don't want to disable that if we're going to have people accessing our network on a regular basis. We want to have a guest network, and implementing a strong password is a good general step, but this was specifically asking about protecting against known vulnerabilities. All right, the next question reads, a user installs a new security camera and is pleased that it automatically connects to the internet and can be viewed remotely without any manual router configuration. However, a security expert advises that the user that the router's settings that allow this convenience are a significant security risk. Which network protocol is most likely responsible for this functionality? Is it A, UPnP, B, IP filtering, C, content filtering, or D, DNS? Pause the video if you do need more time. Your answer's coming in 3, 2, 1. Please pause the video if you need more time. It is A, Universal Plug and Play, or UPnP. We talked about how this is a convenient way for devices to easily access your router and your network. However, it does introduce a significant security, bad thing. This is bad. Don't have it. This is bad because it can allow others to automatically connect, and we don't want that to be able to happen. We want them to have to authenticate so that we know that the person connecting is someone that should be connecting. If you want to know about the other options there, have a read. I'll pause it, but we've got to make a move on to the next question, which reads, a home user is setting up a new Wi-Fi router. The user wants to improve security by making it harder for potential attackers to identify the make and model of the device. What specific action should the user take to accomplish this goal? A, change the default SSID. B, implement a strong password for the Wi-Fi network. C, install the latest firmware updates for the router. Or D, disable the UPnP protocol. Pause the video if you need more time. Your answer is coming in 3, 2, 1. It is A, change the default SSID. The question was specifically asking, how can we stop people from knowing what the default password may be, right? It said, how can we stop them from identifying the make and model of the device? The SSID will generally give that away because it will say like Telstra 123D6 or whatever the model is, which will give away the make and model, which would give them access to what the password could potentially be. All right, the next question reads, a network administrator needs to allow customers on the internet to access a company's web server, which is located on the internal network behind a router. To accomplish this, the administrator configures a router feature that directs all incoming web traffic on a specific port to the web server's private IP address. What is the name of this router feature? A, port forwarding or mapping. B, IP filtering. C, content filtering. Or D, DNS filtration protocol, or DFP. Your answer coming in 3, 2, 1. Here we go. All right, the answer is A, port forwarding or mapping. We discussed that near the end of the video. Hopefully we got that. IP filtering is making sure you're blocking specific IP addresses. Content filtering is when you're blocking specific URL addresses. And I made the last one up. Alrighty. So guys, if you have enjoyed this is all from my learning guide, which is over at journeytocyber.com. Basically, this is something that has helped this person pass their test. They were super grateful to me for that. It's helped these people pass, and additionally, this person passed with almost full marks and has moved on to their Network Plus now. So that's really exciting for me to hear. What do you get with this? Everything from this video has been from this learning guide. So basically, you get everything broken down by exam objective into objective 1, 2, 3, and 4. And within each of those, it's broken down by each sub-exam objective and each dot point. So if you only want to know about exam objective 1.2 and partitioning, you can actually click on that and it will take you straight there. For every exam objective, you're getting detailed notes, you're getting active recall questions, you're getting multiple choice questions. I've given you a few in this video, but in the learning guide, there's like so many. And they're all organized by exam objective. And on top of that, after you've gone through the organized process of reading the notes, doing the questions for each exam objective in order, you can then tackle the randomized practice exams, which have performance-based questions and 90 multiple choice questions as well, just like the real exam may have for you. And I also give you 3 videos talking about how you can actually study effectively so you know you're on track. I actually hold your hand and walk you through it. I'm not just throwing this stuff at you. I'm making sure that you're going to be good for the exam. Okay, so if that sounds good, you can grab that at journeytocyber.com. Sorry guys, this is like the 4th video I filmed in a row. I'm starting to slur my words a little bit. journeytocyber.com, and otherwise, I'm going to keep putting out this free content for you, so I will see you in the next one.